Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the channel. This is our episode 21 of this longer series that we've been doing for a year now, I think,
Yeah,
almost.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so behind the scenes, we were, talking about all these different topics, the perturbation of oil prices, what potentially can emerge because of it. We can update the audience with you showing up on coast to coast, and you can explain what happened there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on in the Middle East. The anniversary of October 7th is tomorrow. We're recording this on October 6th. We'll be releasing this video, on October 7th. There's a lot to go over, but I just want to remind the audience, please go to the description of each of these videos that I make with John. In the description box for the video, there's a link. You click the link and that will take you to John's website. And that way you can sign up for his periodical. You can also sign up for a reading. We'll remind you a couple times throughout the recording here that please click that link, help
Yeah.
John out, help support his work. He does, he shares a lot of information, and he has a wealth of knowledge, and is very knowledgeable, in yeah, the esoterics, but also the history of the world, and so and a lot of people enjoy, getting their history lesson, through these shows that we do. So,
It's so
I
rare that they get that
yeah,
in the mainstream media. Context is thrown right out the window. Just before I forget, though,
yeah.
is the HogueProphecy.com is the / at the end of it Brain, Brain, just to check because I had to update it because there was something going on with the website. So
Let me check here.
yeah, so they don't go to something that's back in May.
So
Oh, it's very interesting because it's kind of the beginning of a lot of this stuff that is most recently happening, but still, I like to keep them
the link that I have is uh,
just.com.
yeah, no, it's hogueprophecy.com/reading.
So, okay, turn reading into brain, as in the brain in my
Brain.
head. Yeah, brain.
Okay, I'll update that. All right,
Yeah.
going forward here. Okay, so but everybody click the link in the description box. It will take you to the right place, I promise you.
Okay.
So John, let's start with let's do a little bit of about the oil. We talked offline about it. All right, and
Well, let's do that, but let's, for the audience sake, just a few words about why we were talking
okay,
about it. Is that at the warm up of the show, we're talking about how, today is before the day before the 7th, and the 7th could very well be when Israel unleashes a major attack on Iran, which could widen the whole war and upset an area of the world where, if damage is done to Iranian oil, or we'll talk some other ways it could happen, if things are destroyed in the Middle East, or things are blocked, then this will have a major impact on the entire global economy and oil
right,
prices and transportation prices and all of that, and food. Everything will be affected.
right. So what is happening at the moment is the future prices and the options. All right, people can buy calls and puts, and they can buy long futures or short futures in the oil markets. And there's two types of oil markets, and I'm not going to get too detailed here, but there's the U.S. oil market, and then there's the international market. That's basically the Saudis run that, right? So you got Brent crude and you got WTI. All right, U.S. is WTI. Trading at this moment of the recording is around 74 for US, and Brent is trading just below 78. Now, some analysts are saying that if a major event happens, that you may see $100 barrel oil, 95 to $100 barrel oil. Now, I would say that probably the middle consensus is around 80 to $85 a barrel. So it probably will go up. unless there's some, ceasefire or something, which I doubt is going to happen anytime
Not
soon.
going to be a ceasefire.
Right. And so I suspect that the oil prices will be going up, and I'm kind of betting that it's around the 80 to 85 mark. Now, we were talking, offline here, the different scenarios. So, maybe, we can, play some of the scenarios quickly, and then we'll go on to the other topics. So, one scenario is that Israel hits Iran's oil fields.
Mm-hmm.
And Iran does export oil. It exports oil to China, but the Saudis have a lot of capacity. So if Israel knocks out the oil fields, Saudi Arabia can make up the difference. So there will be a behavioral shift in the trading. The fundamental would be, well, the Saudis have the capacity to absorb it, so it's not that big of a deal. The behavioral play would be, okay, $85 a barrel. Now we also talked about a scenario. You brought it up.
Yeah.
Well, Iran may knock out Saudi's oil fields.
This is true, and it is a threat that's always been there. It's sort of the closest thing to having a Samson option of a nuclear, throwing out all your 70 nukes in Israel and taking out all your neighbors that are attacking you. But it's done through conventional means. I mean, one of the things it's just laying out there as a threat, but this threat has been born, to elaborate more than what I said before the show to you. This threat was born during the time when Saudi Arabia was an enemy of Iran. So when I hear some people throw it out there, especially now that both Iran and Saudi Arabia soon will be part of BRICS, that I don't think that that's so likely to happen. So the scenario that would maybe the Arabian oil would be left alone. I mean, if Iran was going down, being utterly defeated, maybe then, which I don't see happening, I think that is more likely for Israel. Israel is a very little country, size of New Jersey, and you've got this vast country. It's only got an air force of 200 really that can take the attack into Iran. But that's a whole nother story. We'll keep just for now on the economic situation. I think it's unlikely that Iran would do such an act against Saudi Arabia now, because they've signed the Concord of Détente. Saudi Arabia is with Iran and is against what the Israelis are doing. So at this time, and wants very much to be a part of the BRICS, and also is obligated by a debt that Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, MBS, has to the Chinese. So there's something that happened between Xi Jinping and MBS, where if they did something like that really bad, it would be very bad for them and the Chinese. But it's definitely another side of this that we have to look at is, if the oil of fields of Iran are destroyed, indirectly that could affect the markets very badly, because China is a major importer of Iranian oil. So that would completely disrupt the Chinese economy. And China, since 2016, as Mao Zedong predicted in the early 50s, he said that China would eventually become the largest economy in the world in 2016. It did. Now, I know the Americans like to play around with like GDP farce games, to make it sound like it's something different. But if you base an economy on the amount of buying and selling and money that's happening, as the entire mass of bartering, selling, and buying and all that, China has been the biggest economy in volume since 2016. America doesn't have the same volume. So it's number two in that way of looking at it, which I think is more realistic. I mean, I mean, a lot of America's wealth is based on financial speculation, the financial markets. It's not, we don't have. I mean, Russia has a bigger industrial capacity than we do now. We basically sold all that off. We became a service uh, society, and starting with Clinton. And they never imagine, with their lack of foresight, how China may someday just not fit the colonial idea of the little yellow people that build the stuff for us, so they can't live without us buying it. Well, the Chinese got so big that they are both economies. They are also their own service economy and industrial economy. So, so it would disrupt a lot of things and more. It would probably bring the Chinese militarily into this conflict, as the Russians are already there. And that's another thing that this attack may not go well for Israel, because for several months now, well, not just several months, but I've heard some very interesting reports, like from Colonel McGregor is a good source of mine, and others, that in the last week, the Russians have been sending dozens of pilots to Iran, and with their jets being shipped after them. So you're going to see a lot of Russian pilots in the air with far superior jets, and far sixth generation stuff that our F-35s are most of the time, that only one quarter of them are even able to be used, because they're breaking down all the time. They're too complicated. And it's a classic thing that's been exposed by these wars, is that America's military industrial complex is completely corrupt. It has not built weapons that work. It builds weapons that break down to make more money off of them once they have been sold. So there's a whole life cycle of an F-35 that constantly is having maintenance, which means I imagine even the Israelis, of their 200 jets or 300 jets that they have, all the F-35s they have, probably only one quarter are working. And I imagine a lot of the ones that became hangar queens, as they call it, who were probably destroyed in that last attack because they were under maintenance. So anyway, what that means is there's the Russians. The Russians have a footprint there. They are in the air. They are like they were in North Korea in the Korean War. They're Russians piloting those MiGs, and now we're going to see another even larger amount with even more capable equipment going after these U.S. built, white elephant, you know, tilting machines they're going to have to fly across Iraq, across the Persian Gulf, and we'll have a very long time flying at not supersonic speed. They're just not hypersonic speed. They're going to be seen, and they're going to also be running into perhaps dozens, if not 100 S-400 anti-missile, anti-jet batteries that are the best in the world. They've they've managed to take the Ukrainian Air Force out of the sky, and they also are capable of shooting down Jericho regional ballistic missiles. If the Israelis launch some of them, they can take down ballistic missiles as well. So it could be. I wouldn't be surprised if. I mean, it's almost like the Battle of Britain, but the disadvantage is on the Israelis. They're playing the Germans flying over England for 30 minutes, in a way, with a whole lot of sophisticated systems that the West has never even had a philosophy of understanding how to use. I mean, in the East, our philosophy in the West is that we just have thousands of jets. I mean, certainly we do have the two largest air forces on the planet are actually the U.S. Air Force and the Navy Air Force. And then everybody else's comes afterwards. I think the Russians are about, well, I don't know numbers, but they're not as large as ours, but they don't have to be, because they're not offensive. They defend their land and their airspace, and they have something we don't have at all: anti-missile, anti-aircraft systems that we don't have anything like that. Because our whole idea is just to come in there with air superiority and jam all the radars like we did with Iraq. Of course, those radars were all old. You know, you were talking about the Russians are the most sophisticated in radar technology in the planet. They're way ahead of us, as they are decades ahead of us in hypersonic missiles. They've also modernized their nuclear weapons program. Ours is 32 years rusting in the silos. Some people don't think that a lot of them will even launch. So, uh, so the great hegemon has clay feet because rather than buying decent shoes, if you will, it sold all that money to just make a buck and to not make things that work, but things that are make profit. And it's been completely exposed by what's been going on. I mean, the Iron Dome is something we did. Uh, um, um, the David Sling, I think it's called, is the missile, anti-missile missile. It did not do very well in this last attack of Iran. I watched it. I watched it live. I didn't even know what was happening. And suddenly I'm looking at Tel Aviv, and there it comes. And uh, I would say, calculating from what I saw, 90% of the missiles hit their target, not the other way around. Israelis say all at 10%. No, I saw something different. All you have to do is look at them coming in and you count and you see the flash. And I would say, yeah, when I counted how many Iron Domes actually hit something, once in a while they would, but you know, there was these whole new things where there's this whole stream of missiles in a long column just flying down. And what that was is one of the ballistic Iranian missiles opens up and launches a whole bunch of these missiles. It delayed, so they spread out, and they're all like coming down like little spots of fire. And then when they hit it, go bum 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 bum, and you just count them, and then you count the flashes. And there may be one that's just coming out, goes bam from the Iron Dome, but Iron Dome failed. And they're not talking about this, but it was the Nevatim Air Base is not just one of the biggest air bases in Israel, and they're huge air bases because just basically two, but because the country is so small, you know, it's just one great big target. But it has been the pride until this all started happening of our U.S. air defense systems because it is Nevatim is part of the NORAD system, not just the United States, but it extends all the way out to Nevatim. And the radar was destroyed. And guess how much that radar cost Israel? $500 million, because it's like one of the best radars that we have. So that's gone. That isn't there anymore. And you'll notice when they looked at the private companies that had satellites taking pictures, they're only cropping everything off. I mean, if you put squares on the actual map of Nevatim, it's like little itty bitty boxes. They didn't do anything about the radars over there or the command and control center. And so, you know, one of the things we may see is if well, the nature in which this attack happens, um, it'll be interesting to see what they can actually get up in the air. Now, you know, clearly the Iranians did it again. And the second thing they said, all right, we're coming. So of course the Israelis had a time to get all their jets aloft. So except for as I said, the hangar queens that are always needing maintenance, those kind of jets. But some of them I think got destroyed. I could see some of the hangars were blown up um, by multiple blasts. Uh, Also, it looks like something that looked like it was there was a guy who was doing a show for CNN, I believe, or one of the cable news, and he was on the coast, Tel Aviv, and you could
On the
see,
balcony. He was on the balcony.
yeah, he was up on a
Yeah, I
balcony,
saw
he was on the roof actually, and
that.
you could see, you know, the other ones go real slow because they're ballistic, but the hypersonics go like that, and two of them came down the coast. It looks like they were going after the Mossad office from what I could see of the map of where that was. And but a couple of them kept looking exactly like they were going into the ocean. They weren't going into the ocean. They hit one of the oil rigs because that's why it glowed for a while. They actually struck one of the platforms out there that's drilling or gas, or taking gas out of the big field out there underwater. So that was just to tell everybody, we if you hit us, we will hit you much harder. And Iran has hundreds of thousands of missiles and cruise missiles. It can use its older missiles as decoys, and they'll still hit things. It has tens of thousands of drones. That can be another thing that really confuses, that you got to hit them all, because if you don't, they when they hit something, they make a big boom. So if they're just coming in as telemetry and just doing scouting of how things work and filming and all that, that's one thing, but you don't know for sure. So some of those Garans are going to come in and blow things up. I mean, you could put 100 Garans on the Mossad offices and blow them down. You blow them windows out and take them offices down, make them basically unusable. Um, so the other thing too is that they would be coming in great swarms, and they would be going after infrastructure. They would be taking out the power grids. They'd be taking out the potable water grids, because that's very important. Water piping in a semi-arid country like Israel. They would be taking out transport systems. All Haifa is where most of the reserve strategic fuel and gasoline and oil that is imported comes to Israel. It doesn't pump its own. And there's even some areas of Haifa that have been marked by drones from Hezbollah. So that intel has already gotten to Iran. There are some areas where you have the same kind of fertilizer storage that set off what looked like something like a small nuclear explosion in Beirut. You could have several of those going off because it's as big. So they hit a lot of things, and they couldn't. What they proved, as Scott Ritter aptly said, is that Israel doesn't have a way to defend itself from Iranian missiles. Case story over. That's it. So, um, so that's so in the case of Iran, it's going to be, as far as the missile systems, if you think the caves of Hezbollah are interesting and how many catacombs of caves they've got in the mountains and hills of Lebanon, Iran is 100,000, it's 1,000 times larger than Lebanon. And they have these underground bases all over the country, uh, you know, over thousands of miles. And it's, when you think how small the Israeli Air Force and how big the task of targets is, and how, they don't have the gravity bombs to go hit any of all that stuff. But they will probably strike uh, the nuclear industry, which does, I think, in Fornos and others have very, very deep bunkers. Now, unless they just want to make a token thing that looks good, the only way you're really going to damage the nuclear areas is not just conventional gravity bombs. If you're going to have to, launch a hypersonic Jericho into there, several right after each other, they're probably nuclear. And if they do that, you're going to kick up a lot of Earth into the atmosphere, and that's going to be greatly radioactive, and that will flow over Iran and hit and start flowing over Pakistan. Now, what does Pakistan have that no other Islamic country has? They are a nuclear power, and they have more nukes than Israel, a few hundred more. And they've already stated that if Iran is really in peril, or because it's an Islamic nation, Netanyahu is uniting almost 2 million people on the planet Earth who are Muslims against him in Muslim nations. And one is nuclear, and Iran can become nuclear, especially will come nuclear if this kind of attack happens. Because, as I used to write in my Hogue prophecy reports, that if you a fatwa can be changed if the situation changes. It is true that Ayatollah, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, had made for years. He felt, in fact, he stopped the Iranian CIA said so actually, that they stopped the Iranian nuclear weapons program in 2004 because it was a fatwa was cast against this because he thought it was un-Islamic, it was inhuman to make such weapons of mass destruction. But Muslims are practical people. Fatwas can be changed if they've got a rather barbaric leader of Israel. He can go around criticizing the Iranians as being barbaric, but the Iranians haven't been assassinating leaders. They haven't been carpet bombing Lebanon. They haven't been killing upwards now of approaching from 300 to 600,000 innocent civilians. I mean, that's barbarism. So it's funny how one of my favorite retorts is from Pee Wee Herman. From, Pee Wee, out of the blue, he's talking about Pee Wee Herman. Yes. The when someone's saying like, "You're this, you're that, you're a barbarian, you're that," and Pee Wee go, "I know, I know that's you're a barbarian, but what about me?" Okay, because often people hurl on others what they are, and I'm just saying, I know Alexander Mercurius is too diplomatic, and that's what's beautiful about him, but I'm not so diplomatic. I'm more polemic. So I would say, yes, Netanyahu is a barbarian, and Zionists who are killing, murdering children wantonly, openly. I mean, Smoltrich, uh, with Ben Gavir, one of the real uh, hard Zionist right people, racists, ethno supremacists. I haven't quoted I think it's in this new articles, or it's in my last set of articles under Brain, that he was openly talking at a meeting of really extreme right-wing Zionist supremacists who were, and he was saying, it's kind of a shame, people don't understand there's a good reason why we should like starve everybody out, but because it's such a hard thing to do, we would lose world support, even though it might be just. It's like that's he might
But
as he might
let
as
me
go ahead.
let me just interject for something that I learned a few days ago. All right, before Rosh Hashanah, because we just had Rosh Hashanah, we're in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So just before Rosh Hashanah, I saw a video that it's showing the Rebbe talking to Netanyahu when Netanyahu was a delegate for the UN back in the early 1980s. And what is interesting is during this time period, the Rebbe warned that he said three things to Netanyahu. He said, don't pay attention, independent of someone is for what the Rebbe said or not. I'm just stating facts here, right?
Mhm.
So the Rebbe said to Netanyahu in I think it was 1984, could have been 1983, but somewhere in there. He said to Netanyahu, don't pay attention to the international community for the Seven Front War, and don't be fearful, and don't be hubris. If any of the three happen, Israel will lose.
Well, he was
What is interesting here is that Israel during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s have fell into at least one of those pitfalls that the Rebbe was talking about. I am wondering, because there was a different prime minister during the war for Lebanon in 2006. So a lot of the things that Scott Ritter is saying on why Israel will probably fail in Lebanon, there may be different variables involved now. One, drone technology wasn't around in 2006, so we have that. It's different now. And October 7th was for the psyche of the Jewish people, it's different than anything that was happening in 2006.
Yeah.
So that's a different calculus there.
Mm.
The United States, the whole petrodollar is kind of unraveling. The United States makes a lot and can pump a lot of oil. I mean, it's, so its dependency in the Middle East for oil is radically diminished. And that was through fracking that happened way after 2006.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different variables. Then you add in the whole thing with Taiwan and China and President Xi and the whole, first island chain. In 2006, I don't think there was anything quite like Putin and the Ukrainian, issue that's going on in Europe. So there are different variables going on. And my gut feeling here, John, is just that Netanyahu is remembering that talk he had, which was filmed. All right. He's remembering it and he's going, the previous prime minister that was running and conducting the war in Lebanon in 2006 failed. I think his name was Omar. So he failed. He didn't follow what the Rebbe warned everyone to do. And that Netanyahu, since he was told by the Rebbe in 84 what to do, that he literally has this mission in his mind. And that, I've been having these thoughts about soul roots. And we talked about this in one episode, where there's like the soul root of Jacob, the soul root of Esau and Ishmael, and they can align and have peace, or if they, or they can have war and conflict. I wonder if there's an element, I know this sounds crazy, but I wonder if there's an element of the war part of King David that is tied to the soul root of Netanyahu. Now, King David, if the scholars that know about King David, he wasn't a great person. I mean, there was some bad attributes of King David. All right, it was some of his attributes, he couldn't build the temple. It had to be his son because he was so warlike. I wonder that that there's the war attribute of King David in the soul of Netanyahu that Netanyahu will conduct this war, follow the advice of the Rebbe, but eventually will fall because of the corruption. Because this soul root it's warring, and there's corruption too in this soul.
Yeah, he does have attributes of that root to David, but I don't think David was trying to change the common laws, so that he could have one group of the parliament having power to hire and fire the Supreme Court, so that he can bring forth an apartheid state by having the basic laws reinterpreted in a very National Socialistic way. And I don't think David was a smart enough warrior, because he couldn't have been successful if he hadn't been. Who knows his limitations, and knows how far a bluff can go. And where I think, although there is definitely some of the David warrior in Netanyahu, there's frankly another warrior even greater than him that almost won a world war. They share the same gambling obsession. They gamble on doing crazy things, like doing things that any normal, reasonable, logical military expert or political expert or seasoned politician just wouldn't do. Like invade the Soviet Union. There was the Bulgarian, when Hitler threw 3 million men across the Soviet Union. His whole understanding of the Soviet Union was all you have to do is just kick in the door and the whole rotten edifice will collapse on its own. Well, that's wrong. It's again, Western Europeans classically misreading Russia. It's in their genes. From Napoleon to Hitler to Charles XII to the Teutonic Knights of Germany in 1242. They just willfully, unconsciously do not want to really fathom what Russia is, how the Russian people are. And maybe because I was born in America and at a time when there was a lot of free speech and able to really look at things, and if you applied yourself to study all sides of an issue, you would come to understand that this repeating mistake of Europeans is a kind of psychosis, a collective psychosis. So the other thing that David would never do is set upon annihilating all of his potential enemies all around him. David was a genius as a warrior. He would not fight 7 fronts. That's ridiculous. That is insane. And the only reason why it's worked is that the same insanity, because he's also rooting another fellow in his soul, Mr. Netanyahu. This is the I write in my newest set of articles coming out by mid-October at length about the power of insanity used as a force to surprise and confound saner people in struggles and fights. What eventually happens is that your enemies finally catch what your chaos is all about, what your surprises are all about. And I do not see Netanyahu changing his game. He's just piling down harder on it. And, going around decapitating countries' leadership, assassinating Hanea, who was at the very forefront of trying to negotiate ceasefires with UN help and Qatar help and Egyptian help. And so what do you do? I mean, I see Netanyahu, a man that brazenly wanted to start this war because his strategy, which I think David would be rolling in his tomb if he knew about this. His strategy is to get Israel in so much trouble so that you unite everyone in this toxic thing of we got to be together because they're all out to get us. It's just what Hitler was doing. We have to fight and defeat all these enemies, and even when they were losing, he could turn that and twist that and say, see, I showed you they were really dangerous. Look, the Russians are coming. That's why we tried to stop them. And that worked right up till the Battle of Berlin, so it's like until it was all over. And I really see a parallel much more of Hitler the gambler in Netanyahu, the prime minister, that his roots run deeper than just merely Jewish heritage. It's like an old mistake that human beings do, where if you're the crazy strategist, eventually people figure out that you're just crazy, and then they respond. And the other thing too, to call Iran as he did today when he was very angry about Macron, the president of France, not giving him weapons. But what did he do? Another insane act. He blew up a major multi-billion-dollar offices and factories because France has a lot of economic connections with Lebanon. It used to be a colony of France, semi-colony. People speak French there. And they blew it up today, blew it up in almost like a small nuclear explosion. It was such a big explosion when it went up. It was like a gas company or something. And so his answer was not just he attacked a French economic asset. That's nuts. And most people kind of, when someone's just over the top, they'll just kind of back off because they're kind of caught off guard. No, most people don't do such insane things. And so I think this man has lost himself into the thinking Amalek way too far in a field. And to call the Iranians a barbarous nation is ignoring the fact that the Iranians might have been as long, if not longer, a civilization than Judea has been. And they have survived many wars and adapted themselves to many, survived many conflicts. They even helped Israel rebuild itself after the Babylonian captivity. A lot of what are considered Jewish ideas in Judaism are actually from Zoroastrianism from that. And the Kabbalists are being earlier in Judaic religion than that. So, and I was told this when my first book was out, when a bunch of Jewish scholars came up to me and they told me about it. That's when I first became aware of it. And so the what I see for Netanyahu is the same trajectory that ended up with Adolf Hitler. Um, he wins and wins by chaos, by surprise, and he's been winning. He's getting away with it. And the more like Hitler got away with taking down France, it was considered the biggest army. He thought there's no way the Germans are going to deal with that. And he did the risk of going into Poland while France was on his border, and he just gambled it right. He just realized the French were not ready to fight yet. And so he used that and he defeated Poland. And then he had this crazy idea that even his generals stopped him from doing, because he wanted to actually invade France in November of 1939. And it was just the army had to be refit. Victory also wears an army down, not just defeat. And they had to get better tanks, and things had happened. And he listened in those days because he wasn't like the generalissimo that he was after the first disasters he suffered in Moscow, at the approaches of Moscow in 41, end of 41. So he listened in those days, and then he relented. And von Manstein, one of the best generals the Germans had, created a plan. And that's the other side of, there's genius in, evil can be a genius as well. I remember how Hitler came one day in the 30s and saw all these cardboard boxes. Guderian, who was trying to test the idea of mass tank unit combat. At a time, no one ever thought of tanks as in masses. Most tanks were considered just moving fortresses for infantry support. That was the World War I thing, and it was still alive by the 1930s. But so he walks in there, and he's watching these maneuvers going on, and his sycophants and his sub-commanders are kind of wonder if he's gonna say, what are these crazy people doing with their cardboard boxes running around? He immediately seized upon it and said, no, that's exactly what I want. That's how we can win these wars, with mobile armor and stuff like that. So he was like, give them more energy, give it all the energy. So mad geniuses do get it right a lot because they think out of the box. And Hitler was a kind of a mad genius. I've read all of his secret conversations. I've read all of his speeches. I read Mein Kampf. God, it was difficult, but I did. Um, and there's a lot of blather, but in there's like really disturbing insights into what how evil genius can undermine things. If you want to study how democracy is destroyed, read Adolf Hitler. He has it down, and it's happening now, just like he said it would. So I have a book that I don't know if I'm going to get to it, because there are more important books now than that one. And I'm going to be entering my 70th year at the end of October, so I have to kind of make a list of things that I can get done that are more important. But I still hold the hope that I can do that book, because it looks at all of Hitler's prophecies, and it's a book that the opening line is, I have not come to praise Hitler, but to bury him, taking a little variation on Julius Caesar and Shakespeare. This is one of the most overwritten subjects, like Napoleon. even more books on Napoleon, that we have out there in history debating what was going on. But I contend in the opening of the book that probably the strangest dimension of Hitler, and maybe the most important to understand given our times are being encroached upon again by a different kind of fascism, a corporate, aristocratic, plutocratic fascism, which I've been writing about since 1990, that it would happen in the 2020s, and here it is. The So Hitler was a this book would show that Hitler was actually the greatest prophet of the 20th century, and not in a nice way. Edgar Casey, people would think, was one of the great prophets, and they both died in 1945. Casey in his house in Virginia Beach, Virginia, surrounded by family and friends, dying peacefully. And in the same year, Hitler in his bunker, full of mold and dampness, and the rumble of power generators and the thump of Soviet artillery. He died by his own hand. But before he did, 10 days before he did, um, Bormann, who had been his gatekeeper towards the end, his main secretary in those days, you couldn't see him without going through Bormann first. So Bormann was always like this paunchy shadow following him. When he had his breakdown about the where's Steiner army, there's a lot of people online are making different dialogues from the Untergang, the downfall movie, where Abel Gance, Abel Gance is somebody else. I was mistaken with another person, but the actor, brilliant actor, did the whole nervous breakdown, and after that he simply kind of collapsed and kind of let it all just go, and had that super ego problem when if you lose, you're nothing, and the only thing left to do is go through the motions that lead to suicide. Because if your ego has been defeated, you're nothing. And I mean, he almost did that during the putsch in 1923. He escaped with his shoulder dislocated by somebody that got shot that fell on his shoulder when they were marching against the German military police in Munich. And then he was, on the run, and he was very seriously thinking, well, I'm done, it's over, and he was going to kill himself. But he was talked out of it. So it's not the first time he's thought, well, I'm done. My whole ego, megalomania has been defeated. I have no reason to exist further. And so it happened. So he had, in those final days before he did kill himself, he said his last prophecy, which basically goes like this. Bormann wrote it down. And he said, well, the war is lost. And by the way, this is the things that this book would show, that he was always aware. Actually, I think, well, I don't know, maybe Netanyahu in private is saying his concerns. I mean, I see that he is kind of a nervous wreck. His hands are, as he's reading, he's under a lot of stress, and it's aging him fast. His face is looking different. He's under a lot of stress because he's on a tightrope of madness, and he's trying to stay on the rope. And with his enemies on one end of the rope and his enablers who could turn on him any moment, his American friends on the other side of the rope. So if he gets across, either way, the enablers may have enough of it and say, you're done, cease fire, or we pull the plug on you. And by the way, it's important to point out that during the Lebanese War in 1982, when Sharon's forces were invading Lebanon, it wasn't that it just didn't work out. It was because Ronald Reagan got on the phone with Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister at that time, and said, pull them out. Well, otherwise, we will cease funding Israel, we'll cease arming Israel, we'll cease advising and protecting Israel. You stop this now. And that actually is the power that America has now. But Netanyahu, again, evil genius, amazing. He talked about some of his calculations, and he said in some of these talks he had with Zionist voters that got caught on tape. Even when he asked, "Is there no tape?" and the person said no, but the person was lying, and he taped it anyway. Um, he said, I know the Americans. I know them well. I've lived with them. And he talked about a time when America was starting to weaken in its leadership, and then he would be able to manipulate them. You know, I know how to move the Americans, he said. And he does. And it's working, but it's like, yeah, you're a genius arsonist. You knew how to burn a lot of things down that people never expected you would burn down until the whole world's on fire and you're burned with it. And this is Netanyahu's insanity. And it's not just him. It's just, I gotta say, the thing I've been commenting about since the 90s, when the Soviet Union collapsed and about 1 million Russian Jews ended up being by different Likudnik parties, right-wing prime ministers, they did a policy of a demographic war, sort of like what the Demographic Party and the Democrat Party in our country is trying to do with illegal aliens, try to make a one-party system by changing the demographics of the United States so that there's only people subservient to their wish to kind of outpopulate Americans that are actually from here, um, and create this new thing. It's awful. But what happened in Israel is that whenever Jews from Russia came, and it was mostly at that time, it was except for Ehud Barat, most of that time in the 90s was with right-wing parties. They literally started redemographing Israel by letting in only Jewish Russians who were Zionists. They'd go through questions and answers and they'd find out they're Zionists. And then they would pay for them to have large families. And that is why you had the multitude that could try to put 900,000 people in the West Bank, the Palestinian lands. Um, so, so when he was saying it on Tomorrow a year ago, when he started yelling about Amalek, we're going to go Amalek on you all. He meant it. Just like, it's funny, Bullock, who is a very good um, historian who did a British historian who did a comparison of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. I always found one of the most fundamental things he said so true about the two people. When Adolf Hitler was lying, everybody thought he was telling the truth. When Stalin was lying, whenever they thought Stalin was lying, he was telling the truth. So this is a problem with and Hitler is in his quotes that I would put in this book. He was so certain that no one would listen to him in the West that he just spelled it all out in Mein Kampf and in his speeches. It's all in detail, the whole plan. He didn't have England factored in. He thought he'd have to go in Poland. He'd have to also hit the French, so he didn't have a two-front war issue. And then his whole idea was Lebensraum, a living space for the German people. So we would depopulate the Russians all the way to the Ural Mountains. He did not want to destroy the Soviet Union. He wanted it to survive on the outside of Europe, so that generations in the Thousand-Year Reich, every generation of German men would have their baptism in fire, fighting what's left of the Soviet Union, but never beating it, just keeping it at bay, like the Romans kept the barbarians at bay. And the Urals and the bases and the military camps that would be stringing the whole area by Germans would allow for, because he said the dangers, we're a warrior race, we have to be a warrior race, therefore we have to have some perpetual battle going on. And so that every generation of German men will get the baptism of fire. So, and that's in his conversations. My chapter is going to literally kind of convey his real, some people have done fictional books like Fatherland and others that kind of looked at some of these things that he had dreamed of. But in my book, I'm taking all of it and making it like I'm going to paint this picture of, well, he won the war. And then this whole, this is how the Third Reich was, because he spoke constantly. He was obsessed with the future after the war. He really was getting annoyed that the war was lasting too long. He wanted to be fast because most of his mind, when he was not overseeing the war, was discussing how the Third Reich would live 1,000 years, what it would be like, and um, that's why he was designing Germania, the new Berlin to be the capital of the German Third Reich, and even he did a major design of Linz, Austria, where he grew up. And the other interesting thing is that certain things happen in the future that can change the roles, but they happen anyway. Rather than so one of the climaxes to that chapter, or it's a chapter in itself actually, is that World War III, which had the potential in a Cold War happening, would be a different Cold War. It would be the Western Hemisphere and Eurasia under Hitler's control. Pretty much. Both sides would have eventually nuclear weapons. And rather than the missiles flying over the North Pole that have a white star of the United States and a red star of the Soviet Union passing each other before they've obliterated each other's homelands, the war that could have still happened would have had white stars of the United States and swastikas on the ICBMs going across the Atlantic. And so I look at that scenario, and it's interesting. A lot of prophetic traditions of the world, a lot of the prophecies actually side more with that having happened rather than the Soviet Union, the United States. And I would argue the point that it's interesting that alternative futures that a lot of them we're seeing apply better to the Hitler versus the United States rather than Hitler versus a United States versus the Soviet Union in a nuclear exchange. So it's a fascinating book. I mean, it may be for me what happened with Wagner for Tannhäuser. It was the one opera he felt he never did quite right, although it's marvelous. If it's a mistake, it's a marvelous mistake, in my opinion. But, the original version in the 1840s, the scene with Venus and Tannhäuser in the Venusberg does not really earn the story element of why they broke up. It was really rushed. And so when he got a chance to rewrite it, when the French, he was going to go in the Paris Opera with Napoleon III watching and all, and he got all the ability to upgrade it. And he said, I don't want a ballet in Act Two. The ballet, as far as the story is concerned, can definitely be in the Venusberg when they're having a bacchanalia, all the satyrs and all the nymphs and everybody are running around. So he wrote all this new music, remarkable ballet music for that. And but the problem was that the Jockey Club, which were a bunch of the suitors of a lot of those ballerinas, they used to have dinner and while the first act was happening, and then they'd waddle their way into their booths in Act Two to watch all their little honeys dancing around, which they would go out with them later. Well, Wagner had ruined that, so they decided to completely upset everything. They had cat calling and people would, and people blowing horns, and once again, Wagner tried so many times to make it in Paris. Um, after 5 performances, it was closed because they kept coming. But it was funny. I just read it in Wagner's Mein Leben that there was one person who actually talked back to them and said, "Well, actually, I really." I really like this music, but my word's my word for the Jockey Club, so I gotta keep doing this. But actually, I kind of like coming every night to hear this amazing music. So, as he was disrupting the whole thing, um, so, uh, so we really have with Netanyahu somebody who has gotten away with daring, incredible daring, insane daring. In fact, he's and ruthlessness, a ruthlessness that uh, I don't think even Adolf Hitler would have done some of the things he's done to take out political leaders and all. Uh, Hitler has more limits actually than Netanyahu. I'm sorry to say. Um, And in that regard, um, of course, they both shared a reasoning, talking themselves into mass genocide. And frankly, what's happening in Lebanon, there even some of the places that the Israeli soldiers, little villages that they've caught near the border, they've detonated them. They've razed them to the ground, just like they've systematically razed Gaza cities to ground. So, they're thinking Amalek. They're thinking Samuel book 1. They're thinking wipe them all out and take down their buildings, kill their livestock, everything. And so they stamp them out completely. Um, and but that's a pretty bold thing when there are 9 million people with 400 million neighbors who you're attacking all the time. And you've got this big, dumb American Goyim nation, super nation, just as soulless to the Zionists as any other person who's not purely Jewish and part of the chosen race. That's their view. It's just like, again, it's not a condemnation of the Jewish people. I'm part Jewish myself, so I don't take it as part of my heritage that this is what it means at all. But the Talmudic rabbis have, when I listen to them talk, and I do listen to them, um, that's another kind of insanity. I mean, a complete lack of humanity. I mean, when you have prisoners who are being sodomized and raped by the jail keepers in the West Bank, and then somebody has a conscience, and some guy who's running it and arrested them. A Jewish cop or police arrested these people for abusing people. And then the response was a whole riot, a whole mob of Zionists came. They took the prison. They were ready to kill the people who did this because, look, according to our law, they can do whatever they want to those goyim because those aren't people. They have no soul. They're just automatons for us to use or abuse. And there's no sin in it because they're not people, really. They just appear to be people. They're material that looks and acts like people. I mean, I'm quoting the Rebbe's that I've been listening to for since this war started a year ago.
Well,
And
I think it's important to understand that there are, even in the Orthodox community, that is very knowledgeable about the Talmud and the laws. There's even, they're not monolithic.
no, I know,
So there's a
but they're
group
not
that's very
empowered.
right. But there's a group that is very knowledgeable in Torah and are observant
Yeah.
Jews, very
Mm,
observant Jews that don't even believe in the state of Israel because they don't
I know.
feel as though that it's not following the Talmud,
Yeah,
because certain things haven't taken place and they don't believe in a state of Israel. It's
exactly.
a different concept. But
And
then there's
they're
another
being
group that,
beaten viciously
yeah.
by the
So
Zionists in Israel.
so the problem that I'm noticing in the United States and in the X sphere or the Twitter sphere, right,
Mm,
is that there are too many people that are not really knowledgeable. I mean, you're very knowledgeable, John. I mean, I'm
mm,
not, trying to put you on a pedestal, but I mean, you're very knowledgeable. You've lived
yeah,
many decades. You've learned a lot. You've read. You've written. You do these shows and stuff.
mm,
You've reached millions of people. Over the years, and you have knowledge. Because you put the time into it. But there's a lot of people out there that I'm noticing that just think that all Jews are the same, or and what happens is the anti-Semitism starts to boil, and then all of a sudden it's us versus them, and and
it's
and
tribal.
lose, right, and then you lose context,
Yeah, and that's what I'm all about,
and
context.
and it's really right, so it's really important that people realize that not all Orthodox people, not all Jews are the same, not
No,
all Orthodox people are the same, not all
especially.
knowledgeable scholars within the Talmud and the laws and
Mm,
and Kabbalah and then
mm,
Hasidism and all this stuff, um, think the same way. So
no,
they're, so the nuance is really important. This is
Right.
like a word that I think needs to be used more often, is understanding the nuance, and everyone is so knee jerked with their bias and opinions that they think that, well, all Talmudic Jews are the same. Well, that's not true. I mean, even within the Talmud, you have groups of people that are arguing. The whole Talmud is about people arguing with each other,
Ah,
and they don't. I mean, if anyone reads the actual Talmud, it's about people arguing about one thing, a particular law and how to observe it. And there's like four different arguments happening all the same time. So even within the book, there isn't a true consensus in many times.
but
So
one group has gained power over the others in Israel as well as in a general. And that's what's unfortunate because and Netanyahu has exploited that. He's
yeah,
exploited that
yeah,
one group to keep himself from going to jail for all the corruption that he's done. And and what's sad about this is he's hell bent on destroying Israel as a state to stay out of jail. I mean, he's now like Hitler, he's not a coward. He's brave. He's not a, he's got his worldview. It's twisted, but he's got the courage to go all the way. And he has also talked himself into a psychological up against a wall. He can't now change his strategy. He has to go all the way. And but the problem is he's putting a very small nation to go to war with 400 million Arabs and 41 of 80 million Persians. Um, he also makes the mistake of suddenly coming, before he starts massacring the Lebanese, he says, "We're not against the Lebanese people. We're we love you. We want to be in peace with you." Now, he must have a limit of perception to understand. Like Hitler, Hitler was really good at seeing the faults of his enemies, but he couldn't look at himself. Blind to his own stuff. He was so insightful in the weaknesses of others, but not his own weaknesses. He couldn't see his don't fight for every foot of ground and don't give up anything we've gained. Well, that's he made a decision that there was a encirclement during the Battle of Moscow where the Germans were able to fly in plane loads of supplies and ammunition to keep the Demyanjuk, I think, cauldron all during the winter supplied, surrounded by Soviet armies. But that was a much smaller situation. Soviet army was a lot weaker then. Um, by the time 42 entered into 43, they were saying, well, let's just do what we did there in Stalingrad. And it was a whole different situation. But, the problem is, and I write about it extensively, it's an occult law of reverse effect. And Hitler did it magically, taking one of the most well-known symbols of all ancient peoples all around the world, including the Native Americans and Eurasians and Chinese and Japanese, the swastika. The swastika is a good luck symbol. It's to be used for positive things. But you will find that it's usually not, the swastika is sitting perpendicular, not tilted if it's there, and it often is balanced by a reverse swastika, which is the feminine side. And in the Hindu swastikas, they have them side by side.
oh, I didn't know that. I
Mhm.
thought that it was the Nazis that did the mirror image.
No, they have this. No, they didn't. The Nazis,
So there
just
are other
the
cultures that
one,
have
they
the
had
other
the right,
cultures.
they had
So
the,
there's like a right and a left version.
yeah, there's a
Right.
right swastika, like this thumb's this way, this thumb's that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
hooks are
Yeah.
this way and that way, but they're not like angled
Right.
because, the Hakenkreuz, it's just in balance like that, and that it's not like this,
Right.
which
Right.
changes the gestalt of this when it's running like a thing, hooking. And he did that at first. He said, well, he wanted to tilt it because the sun is in the northern climes is a little differently angled. But what he did is he made a thing that was just stable, you know, into a and it sounds silly, but some of these things really matter on the collective unconscious in mass magic. That if you and what happened was he made it more aggressively powerful by having the Blutfarbe with it in the white circle of the white race in the blood of the master race. But he also said, I wanted to attract a lot of communists to convert to us. So his red banner, that's why he used the red banner of the Soviets and the communists. He said, well, we're going to make it different. And it's all in Mein Kampf. Again, genius, evil genius. But what he did, and what he didn't understand, what he'd unleashed in the cult world, is that he created a situation where he could, in the beginning, not be stopped. He could do anything crazy and win. But by the time so he would bite bigger gambles. Okay, I took down France. They said I'd never be able to do that. Okay, I took down Poland in a two-front war. Nobody thought I survived that. Oh, and look, we even got most of Yugoslavia, and that makes our system better for our invasion of the Soviet Union, even though he lost a month of good weather, which probably ended the whole thing. But he's already, because he said, I win whenever I do this. I'm sure Netanyahu is like saying this in his own way. It's like, I have been winning because I'm not a weakling. He's even called his cabinet sometimes weaklings. I'm going for it, and in that way he's like David, follow me. I've got the guts and the audacity to make this happen. I throw a stone at Goliath and he drops like a sack of potatoes and the Philistines run away. um, I got the magic. I am kind of daring. I'm a little crazy, but we're winning, are we not? And of course, it's such a big personality, other people kind of fall back, and he then he tells himself, look, it's a gamble. We live as a gamble. I'm sure he's reasoning this out. We live as a gamble. He's not going to look at the fact that they actually came in, robbed the land from the Palestinians, openly were planning to do that, and didn't think that, well, like Moshe Dayan thought, okay, he reasoned that, well, that will make sure that our tribes are always armed, always ready, and always united. The way to keep the Jewish tribes united, which is a very hard thing to do in peace, the whole history is, but when everybody has a common enemy, and the more common enemies you have, the more alert, the more ready with your swords and stuff so he's invoked this. And Hitler was doing the same thing, evoking all, the enemies of Germany. And if we don't hit them first, they're going to take us down. And then we'll not read the fact that the way he did it set up for the takedown. So there's what's happening now is Netanyahu's crossing a line. He's used Amalek and evoked the occult law of reverse effect, as Hitler did by bending the swastika funny and not balancing it out with his feminine side, but just all male, all hocking down on things. At first, you cannot lose. It's like magic. You are winning because it's mad magic, and people are bewitched by it. People don't usually think and do such things. You don't have 9 million people go up to bat against the whole Western Asia, 440, 50 million people. And they're not, and you do that by selectively not being able to objectively look and see how Iran's not the same, Lebanon is not the same, Palestine and the Hamas situation was not the same. Things have changed, and you're not listening when you hear that Erdogan and Turkey might get into this, or that Pakistan might, if there's nuclear weapons used, might use some in retaliation, and that's stated to be a deterrent from using them. No, they're mammalic, they're animals. Just like Hitler was saying, oh, the Western leaders are worms. I know, I've met them in Munich in 1938. They're just spineless worms. And of course, at that time they were. But you don't know, things change. And this is the problem with single-pointed people. They don't see the change coming. They think, okay, I'm just going to gamble harder. I'm going to go on 7-front war when my armies have not been built to fight a war any longer than a month since the Israeli state was created. This army is not structured to do that, and they're getting creamed in Lebanon. I've seen some live footage from the Lebanese, where aftermath, where I saw a whole platoon of dead Israeli soldiers, and they're taking out their papers and they're pilfering through the bodies to get intelligence, and they're abusing the bodies, and they're kicking them with their feet and in their face and rubbing their feet in the face and all the usual stuff that happens. But they all these guys, they were all, it was like at least a half of a company or a section that was ambushed, and they were all dead. And these guys were yelling Allah Akbar and running around, and it was one of the villages in the beginning of the hills.
So wait, so this is special forces?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
Well,
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
the special forces, yeah, they could be. I couldn't
Is it-
tell if they're special forces or not, but I can tell you that within the first 5 hours of the first incursion, they were all these helicopters coming in. They were
my
lots of
understand
people were wounded and killed.
my understand what's going on, all right, is
Mhm.
that there were forward operations with special
Mhm.
forces to give intel, and then there were also
The follow-up.
airstrikes that
Yeah,
followed
the
with
follow-up.
air. Now, at the shul during Rosh Hashanah, there was actually an IDF soldier there that
Mhm.
came to New York on vacation because he was deployed into Gaza, and they finished their operations in Gaza. That his unit was, on vacation, right?
Yeah, because they were
So
getting whipped.
right. Well, they're on vacation now, and
Yeah.
then what's happening is that the what he told us is
Mhm.
they're going to be deployed into Lebanon. Most likely, this is going to happen after Sukkot. So
What date
Israel
is
is
Sukkot?
so that so if we take because it's multiple days, if we take the
Mhm.
end of Sukkot,
Okay.
that should be, hold on, it's 2024. Um, all right, it starts on the 16th and it ends on the 23rd.
Okay.
So what they're doing, what they basically did, what the Israelis did is for the infantry, the normal infantry
Mhm.
and the armor division, they are held steady, ready. So basically, they're pulling out of Gaza.
Mhm.
They're also bringing other troops that weren't involved in Gaza and
Yeah.
getting them ramped up,
Yeah.
right? Because they basically has a reserve force, right? So
They're
they have
going
to
to
get them.
have to use just about
Right.
everybody. Yeah.
So what's happening is that the ones that were deployed in Gaza, they're on leave. Some of
Mhm.
them came to the United States for the holidays, blah blah blah. So he's going to be, after the high holy days, he's going back to his unit, and they're getting ready for deployment into Lebanon after Sukkot. Is what the talk is that. So, and now you got to remember, Jews go off the lunar calendar.
Yeah.
October 7th it was Simchas Torah, which is the day after Sukkot.
Got it.
So I, I'm
So
telling
not
you,
this October. You're talking about last October 7th or this October 7th?
last October
Yeah.
7th
Right.
was Simchas Torah.
Sukkot. That's right. Yeah.
So at the end of Sukkot in 2024, Simchas Torah in Israel is going to be the 24th. I would not be surprised that Netanyahu hits extremely hard, and it's like a blitzkrieg into Lebanon on Simchas Torah or the day after.
Yeah.
And it's like so this is kind of like everyone's like going, what's going on? So I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be rocket lobbing back and forth between Israel and Hezbollah.
Mhm.
There's going to be still airstrikes. There's going to be forward deployment with the special forces.
Mhm.
But the armored division and the main infantry is not going to go in until after Sukkot.
Well, that's the plan.
Now, I think that Israel might, during this period of time between Rosh Hashanah, because we just finished Rosh Hashanah, between
Mhm.
Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, Israel may strike some Iran facilities, but kind of like a limited strike, based on the rockets that were lobbed towards Tel Aviv. So I think that there's two things that are going on here: the preparation for the land invasion in the northern front after Sukkot, and in between that, there's going to be some rockets being lobbed back and forth between Israel and Iran. Now, how bad that gets with Iran and Israel, I don't know. Then I would not be surprised if there's expulsion of individuals out of certain regions in the West Bank. They're going to be
Well,
pushing some
well,
of
yeah,
the Palestinians out of the West Bank.
there's a lot of that, and that might actually overthrow the Hashemite king in Jordan, because
Mm-hmm.
there's just about having a revolution there about this, because the
Mm-hmm.
majority is Palestinian, and definitely, as I predicted, unfortunately, the West Bank is now being systematically destroyed, the Palestinian areas and stuff. That's either to push them to the Palestinian border, or the West Bank border into Jordan. They're either going into Jordan or they're going to stay 6 feet under. And that's it's now.
Now, if you remember that when they were building up forces around Gaza before they actually made the move, it was weeks. My memory is it was weeks before they moved in,
Yeah, it
and they
was
just kind
weeks.
of, yeah. So
But
it's
actually,
almost like
those
they're
weeks have
setting up.
already happened. Those actually, I just have to say, push back a little bit about what you're saying, because of what I'm seeing on the ground is that the tanks have been lined up and ready for weeks. I've seen them, but there's an interesting thing that happened that nobody's talking about in the Western media. But just like nobody talked about the Mossad base, lookout base in Golden Heights was absolutely obliterated in that first 13th April demonstration, because those were the people that out of that area, they infiltrated into Syria and they set up the Damascus Iranian embassy being hit by Israeli jets in Syrian airspace that decapitated some chief generals on Hezbollah and Iran in a diplomatic compound, which is the property of a sovereign nation. All diplomatic grounds are the same, and that's the world law. So they literally struck Iran. And that's always been Iran saying very consistently, if you actually get into our airspace and into our land and hit us there, then it's war. And it happened. That's the start of this whole escalation. Now, I can tell you this, that Mir Fanosheva and some other really good RT correspondents that are in Jerusalem, they went to the same fields that I've been seeing for months, being filled with more and more Merkava tanks. I mean, just absolutely lined up. All, I mean, it's like major brigades already there. They've moved forward. They're not there anymore. They're they're either right on the border or they're in Lebanon. The reports she was saying is they are in Lebanon. Now, they may not be very far into Lebanon. And one of the reasons why they probably were moved, because, one thing to have plans and holy holidays, but the when you have all those tanks packed together like that, one of the things that happened in October 1st Iranian missile attack, was they also fired on the masses of tanks. So that might have changed some plans. The other thing too is that they're talking already that they've killed around 450 Hezbollah soldiers. They're not talking about their own casualties. Now, I'm actually seeing them on the ground, and they're not doing very well. If that's the special forces, Hezbollah, who are very seasoned, have been fighting, they learned their trade fighting ISIS in the Syrian civil war. And so they're highly trained, they're highly seasoned. They're probably the only other group of combat fighters in the planet right now that could match the Russians in military experience and success on the battlefield is the Hezbollah people. And you got the IDF, which is more like a national guard than a real
Mm,
standing army.
mm, mm.
And they've been taking lots of losses, and if this is just the preliminary scouting and stuff, wait, I think I'll just go on the record here that I think if after Sukkot they make a big move, the Israeli army is going to be defeated, as it has been before. Lebanon is, as they say in Lebanon, it always seems to be the graveyard of any attempt to really expand this thing beyond beating up on Palestinians inside the 1967 borders. And it doesn't work out. It's mountainous. It's and so I don't think the IDF can beat these people. And they would be walking right into the trap. And the Lebanese would say, please come in, come in. We're so eager. Before they killed Nasrallah and decapitated the leadership of civilian and military leadership at the opening of the bombings of Lebanon, Nasrallah was saying, "We are waiting. We invite you if you dare. We've been preparing for this because they're an ambushing force. And they even have tunnels where they'll let the Israelis walk in deep, and then they'll attack them from behind. That's what happened in 2006, and the system is far more elaborate. And they're hardly touching anything of what the Hezbollah command structure. They were not actually, I found out, they were not actually hit by the Pacer attacks when they blew up all the Pacers. Those were mostly Hezbollah bureaucrats. Because, Hezbollah is not just a military militia, it's also a party. It's like a part of a government involved with the rest of the Lebanese government. They have a very large part of the parliament. And so most of the people that were being blinded and losing their hands and all, and having their cell phones in their pockets and their pants blow a hole in their torsos and stuff like that was mostly doctors who use pagers, medics who use ambulances with pagers, and a lot of civilians like, oh, here, you want to call so and so? Here's my pager. Check it for me. You're like a little child, and the child gets killed. Really awful things to do. But they're not the barbarians, you know. So I know you're not the barbarians. But what about me? You know.
Well,
So
my understanding is that what Netanyahu telegraphed to the Lebanese people
hmm,
was that he said to retreat farther back from the Litani line.
yeah.
And there's a river. Do you remember the
Mhm.
river that's
Oh
north of
yeah,
that?
I've seen
Okay,
it.
all right, all right. So he's saying to be above that river.
Yeah.
My thinking is this: that the 1701 resolution area is going to be heavily bombed.
Oh yeah, it's already being heavily.
But
Well, that's also southern
like
Lebanon.
Gaza bomb, like Gaza bombed.
But
It
but
hasn't
but
been Gaza bombed yet.
no, I'm watching it. It's being Gaza bombed. I can concur. It's happening. It's taking a little longer. There's a bigger urban area to
Really?
deal with. But they are, and I can tell you now, their aim is to raise again southern uh, Beirut into a rubble field, just like what happened in 2006. The Israelis dropped in the first days of the bombing of Lebanon. They dropped tons and tons more bombs than they did for a whole month in the 2006 war. So yes, that's definitely happening. But what they're doing is, I mean, it's amazing the hubris of this man. He could say, "Oh, well, we love you, but all you people that are living on the wrong side of Litani, you got to get out. So we're warning you. We love you, but we're going. But we're going to kill millions of you if you don't do what we say. And how can these people get out? They don't get the leaflets anymore. They all these people started going. I saw the traffic jams, and they're being bombed, just like what happened to the
Mhm.
Palestinians. Oh, move over here. This is now, move over there, and then they're shot both ways, either ways. And the Lebanese, because I'm in touch with a lot of the Lebanese people, are saying, "Yep, we're the new Palestinians in Gaza. It's our turn. They're going to kill us just like they're killing the Palestinians in Gaza." So, but the thing that's happening too, which people are not watching, is there's 1 million people that have left Lebanon. In fact, a lot of them were Syrians that left Syria, and it's safer in Syria, so they're going back into Syria as refugees. But they're crowding up against Turkey border, Turkey. And this could be a Bangladesh India moment where if they keep flooding in, Turkey's already to the max for people. And Erdogan, who plays everybody's side, like God knows how often, but he might have to actually get involved and bring in the largest, after the United States, the largest NATO force, may actually go to war with Israel. That's in the wings. Uh, the people of Egypt really don't like El-Sisi being kind of a tool of Netanyahu. And there's a lot of this unstable, the stability of the Egyptian government is in doubt, and the army feels embarrassed and ashamed about how they're being, treated, and in this situation with the Philadelphia corridor. And I said it early on in this conflict, do not be surprised if Egypt's army goes in too.
Mhm.
This is the consequences of trying to fight, and Israel can just bomb Hodeida harbor all it likes, but it can't touch all the subterranean caves that the Yemenis have created, the Ansarallah, and they have hypersonic missiles, they as well. So
I mean, what if?
this
I
is a
mean,
mess. This
it
is a hornet's
it's a
nest that
yeah,
he's kicked open.
definitely, definitely. Now, most people think, especially in international affairs, that you have people, you have countries that make strategic moves, win, lose on the battlefield, and the border system kind of emerges.
Mhm.
But okay, and that's a typical Western way of thinking of events. But let's
Unless
just
you're
let
just interject and briefly, just unless you're trying to create in Europe a greater Germany, or you're trying to create in Western Asia a greater Israel.
right. Well, I'm getting there. All right. So what if, what if, even if it's a very low probability black swan kind of event, where it's like a Six Sigma event, all right, where it's like statistically impossible, but what if the borders that are actually in the Bible? Now, scholars can debate on like a little bit of the interpretation between Ezekiel and Numbers borders and where they exactly are. But let's just say
Mhm.
whichever the borders are based on a consensus of scholars,
Mhm.
for the borders to get to that level, to where it would be much farther into Lebanon, parts of Syria, parts of Jordan, parts of Egypt, all right, parts of Iraq. For it to do that, it has to be literally a major regional war. And we are seeing the tiptoes of this
Yeah.
happening. Now, the point I'm making is that I'm not so sure that these events are forward. I am thinking that in some of the math in some mathematical models with computer science, there's something called backwardation, where you can kind of like take, if you sometimes you may know an event, what you need to do is figure out what events need to take place in the past, run a simulation to get to that, to allow for the future event to take place.
like Greater Germany is a past
Well, yeah,
precedent.
well, yeah,
Look what
well,
that
yeah,
did.
yeah. But what my point here is that even though there may be a very low probability event, we may be actually seeing the emergent property of something that is supposed to happen, but we aren't smart enough to understand why it's
Well,
supposed to happen.
I would say that it's certainly some there is definitely in the Zionist leaders want this to happen, and I've been reading all their quotes from Haaretz, and I mean from not just Haaretz, the founder of Zionism to the present is that the whole idea was to create Greater Israel, and they've been musing about it like Hitler did in Mein Kampf about Greater Germany, and trying to play the thing, see how it worked, and he almost pulled it off. And he had to win fast and crazy and throw everybody off because you're dealing in a similar thing. You've got 80 million Germans against hundreds of millions of enemies in Europe.
But
You
but if there wasn't if there wasn't a push for Greater Germany, there
Mhm.
wouldn't have been a push for the state of Israel. The state
Well,
of
that's
Israel would
exactly
not have been
true. And I would quote even Menachem Begin and then Rabatinsky and other people who actually Begin was a student of Jabotinsky. He was the founder of the right wing Irgun and then Likud. And already there were a lot of secular Jews like Einstein and others. They wrote the famous pay, article in the New York Times in the same year Israel was born in 1948, which I posted in my articles, where they literally said the Likud has a side to it that they could be like National Socialists, they could be like Hitlerian. That was unfortunately, very prophetic of Mr. Einstein and some of his fellow writers. And I quoted Jabotinsky saying that though Hitler is very odious to all this, he had an interesting idea with ethnic cleansing and how to do it. So yes, because of a Greater Germany attempt, a kind of a madcap attempt that failed, I think what Israel is doing is following a same plan that will lead to failure and catastrophic failure. Uh, a diaspora of the Israeli population, possibly. I was looking at the astrology of it. There's always a possibility. It seems to me that most of this, the way it's going, is either going to be decided in this month or next month. But then I had to say in these new articles, get granted saying that, I had to also look at the astrology and judicial astrology to look what could happen. And this process that could end in the second diaspora could see this linger until 2026. I won't get into all the astrology because it'll just sound like gobbledygook, but I lay it out in the articles, and if you guys subscribe to it, you can see it all. Quite involved. I originally my article on the Israeli theater, I had to finally divide it into 4 different articles because it was so big an issue to talk about because it's really coming to a head. Um, but the other factor too is that the the way this works for Netanyahu is that he has the enabler, the United States. Those bombs are U.S. bombs. Those planes are U.S. built. And if there's the slaying and all that, it was a effort by the military industrial complex of both nations. And so you want to talk about black swan, is that America is overstretched. And while this is all happening, there's a political election going on. The president of the United States literally was taken out of power by a coup d'etat in August. And he kind of got a little one back on Kamala Harris by uh, doing something he hadn't done all his presidency. He actually suddenly appeared the very moment Kamala Harris was going to take credit for the strike of the longshoremen. He suddenly stepped up, and all the cameras all around the world went to him because he'd never walked into the press corps department before, and he did a press corps interview. And he said some interesting things. And being that he's a Scorpio like myself, I get him a lot of ways. he was doing the Klingon serves the revenge cold to Miss Harris. He basically saying, well, I just here to say for the record that and he was talking about how proud he was, but it was like a double-edged sword. He was saying because Kamala Harris trying to pretend that she hasn't been exactly signing off on everything he's done, which is pissing everybody, but led to him being supplanted by her. But he kind of coming up for his own need to settle the score. He said because he hates Obama now, they're not talking anymore. This is the second time Obama stiffed him off, and when he was vice president, he did it, and then he does it when he's president. So they are enemies now. So he's going after Obama's protege, which is Kamala Harris, and saying, well, she signed off on all the treaties and orders and things that I've done in my presidency. All the things that Trump's people and Kennedy and the others are saying are failed. But he was literally saying, well, if I'm going down, what I saw is he's saying, if I'm going down, she's going down with me. And so, but of course, it's an interesting thing I'm watching too, because in CNN and all there, I've never seen the people who are playing the devil's advocate, like the Republican in CNN. There's a guy there that's just nailing it, and just it's almost like CNN is helping it happen. And here's why. You have in Biden and in Donald Trump staunch Zionists, and Bobby Kennedy too. So there's another way this could work out to get out of the hole. And then Kamala Harris she's just amoral. Uh, she doesn't have what it takes to even run a bath, let alone run a presidency. And people are starting to see it, and people are starting to pull away. And it could actually be a landslide if there's not enough illegal aliens that can illegally vote in this election, which is definitely being planned. But there's also so much evidence of it that this could really throw a monkey wrench legally into a lot of things. It won't, if there's legal actions for this election, it's going to stick more on the demographic party for trying to turn the country, just like Likud did, to a right-wing country where the majority is still, in fact, Netanyahu's polls have gone way up. He's like, well, he's going to get it done. Where it's kind of scary and we're on the edge, but hell, we're always on the edge here. So let's get it done. Let's take care of everybody in one shot. It's and that there's a very strong feeling in Israel for that. The tribal nature, it's us or them, and so he knows it. He's playing that. He's a genius, a diabolical genius politically. I have a lot of respect for him for that. I don't think he's a very nice human being, and he might very well be the man who destroys human civilization. But he's a very interesting man, and what a survivor. But it's his being so good at it that's setting himself up for a very, very big fall, just like Hitler, because he gambles just like Hitler and he wins just like Hitler until he takes too long a step. And all that evil luck of a twisted swastika, or that evil luck of a crying out Amalek, to invoke something divine from the Bible as this is what we're doing, need to do the necessary evil for some higher purpose, which is very much what Hitler reasoned all the time. You've been invoking the law, well, you're using Samuel in reverse effect. And what happens is in Nordic mythology, which was a basic, Wagner and Tolkien both did their epics, Lord of the Rings for Tolkien, the Ring of the Nibelungen for his 4-part opera music drama, Wagner. They all came from the same sources, Tolkien and Wagner. Now, the Ring of Power was Sauron's ring, was that beautiful ring with the dark elvish flaming letters in it. But Wagner used the more traditional Norse interpretation, the ring that Albrecht creates by renouncing love. He gives him the power to know how to take this bar of red gold that glows under the water at sunrise for the Rhine Maiden's garden, to shrink it into a ring forge it into a ring without losing any of the gold. Somehow this way of shrinking it. So that it's a ring that's designed like a serpent wrapped around your finger who's holding the tail in his mouth to make the ring. The ring of power, if it's wisely held, the serpent does not lust to gain more power and eat more power by eating its tail until there's no serpent anymore. And the curse of the ring is that that's what happens. It eats up the person using it. It eats up the nation that follows its magic. The swastika, the things like this. Hitler, when he started using this dark magic to his success, it just set the stage for it to turn on him. And he couldn't lose until 42. He couldn't win for the rest of the war. And he even said, I feel like some curse is on me. I don't understand why I can't. Everything's going wrong. And it utterly devoured the greater German Reich. And unfortunately, I predict it will utterly devour the greater Israel attempt of these people who presume to know God's mystery and speak for God's mystery, just like Hitler did. It's a bad turn. It's got all the things that can argue its favor in this gamble, even backed by religious. We have to do it. It's going to be a disaster. And it could very well, as a lot of Kabbalist Rebbe's that I have contacts with through some contacts in America, they're expecting the state of Israel to be destroyed. And then people will have to back off, relax, reflect, and then look at the other possibilities of prophecy, which were not a robbery of land. Now you got your state, but you robbed it. It's a sin. That's not how it's supposed to happen. The temple's not, it's going to come down, and the Torah Jews and all many other sects of Judaism understand this, and Kabbalism. But the ethnocentric supremacists, that those Rebbe's that have drunk that Kool-Aid, they're twisting Talmudic law, I say. Because if this argument is foisted and it becomes empowered, how can there be any other discussions? The synagogues will be destroyed. The cities of Israel will be destroyed. There will be no room for talk and argument anymore. There'll just be ruins. And there'll be a people cast to the four winds once again through their own hubris of a few of them who took power over all of them. That's what I see. I don't like that I see it. I'm part Jewish myself. I don't like this. But it's simple. We were talking about math. Well, it is simple math. 9 million people cannot defeat nearly 500 million people that turn into enemies in the same neighborhood. If your only fallback is America when it's enabling you because it's arming you to do all this genociding and stuff, if its fleet is a white elephant, carriers are a thing of the past, this war may prove, or the war at some time may prove, how completely useless are those poor guys and gals that are crewing 5,000 strong in all those carriers. And if this war, and Netanyahu is his ace in the hole is to create such a danger that how can the Americans, since the government is owned by AIPAC, how can the American government not come in to save us from ourselves and come in directly into our war and go directly after Iran? You're going to see them losing carriers. You're going to see the U.S. fleet sinking. There's so many prophecies in Nostradamus about that. And I've spoken about those before. I mean, this is a disaster that has not been seen since somebody tried to create a greater German Reich. and now I was trying to create a greater Israeli Israel. And yet, back again to the discussions and the debates that are happening. I mean, I always rely on the first three times the Lord of Hosts talked to Abraham about the promised land and gave and listed out the lands that were his and his people, his seed. Now, this basic idea that the vessel of the seed makes a difference to the seed of Abraham, that Hagar had Ishmael first, that I think he was a teenager by the time Isaac was born, but Sarah was barren. And what was Abraham to do? He asked Sarah if he could put his seed into Hagar, her servant girl. She had agreed to it, wasn't coerced. Sarah agreed to it because, yeah, I'm barren. I'm too old. We can't make this covenant work unless we think this out and find a way. So Hagar took Abraham's seed and created Ishmael. And then later, Isaac, the father of the Hebrews, father of the Arabs, Ishmael, gained the seed. And I see people selectively forgetting in a lot of the arguments and debates about this among scholars and among some of the people who are just outright fascist Zionists, who often come visit my email and say really nasty things and threatening things. But I take the responsibility for saying my view, and that it's going to upset some people. So it doesn't bother me. This is my responsibility. But I just come back like I did on Coast to Coast. I did get to be on the show, and it was one of the best shows that I've done. So I may be back on again for the presidential elections, maybe the night before or on the 1st of November. And I will be on election night probably sometime after 12, when it's early hours of November 6th, to assess what happened and what happened with my predictions, which will be official on 4th at the latest, election eve. I had a number of phone calls, and it was an interesting spread. But at the end, the last phone call was definitely a Zionist, and went really at me and said these things. But I had this little talk about him about the seed. In biblical lore, the seed of the man is the seed. It is the primary, obviously, because if there was no seed, there'd be no wombs fertilized by the seed. So if this seed is from the father, that's where you gain the family name and the family seed. It is secondary who the womb is. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with this. I'm just simply the facts of life, birds and the bees. The seed is the progenitor that requires a vessel, the womb, to create a person. And it's then said that it's the man because he's also a seed bearer that keeps the seed of a line, not the female. These are not my opinions. This is kind of how it's laid out in the biblical reality. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if what are people who are Zionists saying? Are they saying that the seed going into Hagar suddenly is not Abraham's seed anymore because it went into the wrong ventris? Oh, but it's Sarah because suddenly she was fertile again, and we can presume that God wanted her to also have seed too. Well, maybe God wanted to expand the cousin brothers and cousin sisters of the Semitic race. I mean, it's when people throw out you're an anti-Semite. I have to say, first off, I'm part Semite, so that's not possible. Secondly, Palestinians are Semites of the same seed of Abraham. Lebanese are Semites, same seed of Abraham. Because of the Arab Arab Ishmael. So I think that the real argument we should be having, that's been thousands of years in different sects of Judaism arguing it, is who is bending the law to suit their own ego? Who's bending the law to make one side superior and the other side inferior? I think a lot of the writings after the first, before Isaac was there, it's not his fault. He gets born. Now you have two from Sarah and the servant girl. So that causes a little controversy, I'm sure, in simple fact. And it's only after that that all the other seven or so of the total of messages from God, it gets augmented. And suddenly now it's all about Isaac being number one and the Arabs being number two. And that slowly leads over years to Zionism, that the promised land is only for Jews. The chosen people are the Jews, although it's the same seed of Abraham. You know, I just point out the seed, if the seed's the same, you can't choose. You have to listen to the first three messages of the Lord of Hosts, who said, this was for all of my seed, all of Abraham's seed. Well, now there's two lines of Abraham's seed. So they all should be living in harmony in the promised land. It's their promised land. It's Palestine's promise. Palestinian promised land is as much to the Jews. And if you don't work it out, you'll turn it into a burning cinder, this promised land, in the near future. Because Israel has nukes. It's a rogue nuclear state. It has them, according to global law, world law, it's illegal. They have not declared that they are a nuclear power. Pakistan has declared, and Pakistan is waiting if nukes are used. So that's basically, I guess we can just leave it there. It's
I definitely want to remind the audience, please click the link in the video. That'll take you to John's website. You can sign up for his periodical, and you can also do a reading. That way you can help support his work, and you know, he can continue the mission on informing people what, you know, how to look at world events in a different lens. I think we showed a few examples on how you can look at, you know, world events in a different lens. You know, I'm just I
here to
think the
make.
audience, yeah, I think, you know, what it is the audience that there are Muslims that watch, there are Jews that watch, there are liberal Jews, there are Orthodox Jews, there are, you know, there's just so many different people, and I think you're bringing up a good point about the seed of Abraham, and you know, I think if you take it from the perspective of the seed of Abraham, what does Abraham represent? Abraham represents monotheism. And what's the largest religions in the world? It's, you know, it's Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, you
Judaism.
know, right? So the seed of Abraham, you're right, is about monotheism. You know,
Yeah.
now, you know, if you want to get into, you know, a little bit more esoteric aspect to this, it's really the angel said not to Abraham, the angel said to Sarah that she was going to have a child. And so, you know, so that would mean that it's her egg, not Hagar's egg. So Sarah did,
but it's
so
still
what,
Abraham's seed.
yeah. But
That doesn't change it.
Yeah, but no, that you're right. You're right. For monotheism, But the thing is that where Sarah went wrong is she didn't believe the angel. Her
She had
clock was ticking.
grounds. She was old. She was like 70 or something.
But the thing is, yeah, well, I thought she was 100.
It's an honest mistake.
Yeah, but she didn't believe, and so therefore, you know, it caused problem. And then the other esoteric aspect to this is that Judaism comes off the line of the mother, not the father. So there is something to be said about the angel blessing the egg of the female. And so
Well, maybe the
there
Quran had an
so
angel
there's two
blessing
things,
Hagar.
but there's two things going on here. You're right about monotheism,
Yeah.
and you're right that the land, the the Holy Land, instead of calling it the Promised Land, just the Holy Land, is for all, not for just the Jews. You're right about that because it's coming from Abraham, the seed of Abraham, which is monotheism. So there's another aspect to this, the nuance, and that is the blessing of the egg of Sarah, not Hagar. And so it adds to a complexity that,
That's what the Jews say. I don't know if the Arabs have the same story.
Well, no, that's you're right. You're right. The Arabs, say one thing, and the Jews say another. But
I
the
read the
thing is
Quran,
that,
and they make it. It's the whole story is reversed. Yeah,
well, you're right.
that Ishmael is the top Semite.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it. I don't think there is a top Semite, but but the thing
Well,
is that
there
the
is the
question.
legitimate and the illegitimate. That
Well,
maybe it's a little more cleverly nuanced, but the feeling I got from Muhammad was that although he was, Islam is not predisposed to hate Jews and
yeah, but
be nasty.
which group went into Egypt to be slaves?
They had a choice; they didn't have to do that.
It was Jacob's line, not
Jacob,
Esau's line, and not Ishmael's line.
okay,
All right, and during
but
the
isn't he part of
Exodus,
the root line?
wait,
I mean,
the root.
Jacob's not just coming out of left field.
No. Jacob's
He's
coming
part
from Isaac.
of the seed
Jacob's
of
coming from
Abraham.
coming
Yeah.
from Isaac, and Isaac's
So,
coming from Abraham.
so
So
whatever the
Abraham refer
tree lines do in the tree
yeah,
is what they do. It's still Abraham's trunk.
but Jacob's line goes into hell, which is Egypt, and is enslaved, and there is an exodus, and those people receive a law
Yeah.
at the mountain.
Yeah.
That did not happen with Ishmael. That did not happen with Esau. So,
Well,
but you're right that you're right with the seed of Abraham represents monotheism, and how all of these things come to they come to a
then
singularity, and that
I would,
they're together.
yeah, and I would then say it was if that is true, that because they have suffered in captivity in Egypt and suffered the 40 years in Exodus and suffered fighting to get this promised land.
Mhm.
Um, if they are more noble, they should have behaved more nobly
I agree with that.
and love their cousin, brother, sister Arabs. Welcome them.
See, you're bringing up a
Not
good point, because even
not
in
take their lands. Not, I mean, it's one thing to just walk in and take people's land. That is not a holy act. Well, it's part
well,
of the Ten Commandments. Thou
yeah, but
shalt
I
not
think that, yeah,
steal.
but I mean, forget about the religious aspect of it.
Yeah,
Every nation has warred another group of people to
yeah,
take land away from them to
I
have
know.
a nation.
But
And
not the
so,
same seed of Abraham. That shouldn't have happened because it's the land given to both of them. I mean, yes, we can get into the secular reality, but there's no, you cannot divide the secular reality with the spiritual reality, the dogma. And that's the thing that yes, everybody does this. Yes. That means there's no super Jews and there's no super Germans. Everybody does it, and it's
well,
because they
everybody,
live
yeah,
in
everybody,
666. They live in forgetting the divine. That's literally what 666 stands for. The number of man is man in sin. And the sin is, what does sin mean in its root? To forget God, to forget the divine. And what is repent? It means remember, come together. The member Semite Arabs, the member Semite Jews. And you know what? This may end up this may end up, and all this mess is over. I write about this too, is I've said it before, but went deeper into these articles about it, is that it might come full circle. Uh, there's no two-state solutions dead. Never was a viable idea. There will be one state. And I think the seed of Abraham kind of understands this better than the seed of no seed of that created the Arabs are more involved in this than the seed that created the Hebrews, because I mean, you'll hear that the Palestinians just want to live in peace, and that they want to actually share the land. That was tried. I mean, the way it was done was wrong. I really think it's almost like it's going to be a situation that the Jews have to go away and come back in a different way, because the way they came in 48 was wrong. It was sin, in my view. Thou shalt not steal. Either that or the Ten Commandments don't matter. Thou shalt not.
It's very possible that you're right, that the borders, the biblical borders, do not manifest until after this destruction of Israel.
Well, that is really it is in the eschatological future of a number of Israeli and Arab eschatological views.
And it could be a greater destruction, not just of the state of Israel. It could be the destruction of Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and
all the land that was Eretz Israel or the promised land,
all of it, right?
And then in ruins,
and then it's reconstituted, right?
That's what a lot of Kabbalists, my contacts in the Kabbalist Rebbes say.
This is interesting because this is with the about the vessel, the breaking of the vessels, right? The light going into the vessel and the vessels break, and then they this is the Sephiros, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of emblematic of the vessel breaking. The ore comes in, the vessel can't hold the light. The Israel, the state of Israel, can't hold the light.
Yeah, the vessel,
and then it shatters.
Yeah,
right. And then there's a kind of like a reconstitution of it.
I think the Kabbalists are right on this. I think that their view of it may very well happen. I mean, that it's a necessary destruction of this situation, and so that it has to, and out of its ashes.
Do you think that Europe is better off now than it was, let's say, pre-World War II?
No, not, but that's a whole other story because of what's going on with Ukraine. If anything, it's going to decline. I mean, this whole thing with the Ukrainian thing, which is, again, this is another situation. The last time we had a world war was when Italy and Germany became fascist nations in Europe, and then it expanded to the militarism of the fascist Japanese Empire. So, a lot of people say, oh, John, that there's Nazis in every country. I said, yeah, I know they are. They march and do their silly stuff, but not very rarely do you have them take power like they did in Germany, like they did in Italy. And when that happens, World War happens. Well, guess what? Here we are in World War III, the conventional version of it since 2022, and we're in it because another European nation, a large European nation, Ukraine, with the aid of the enabler America, allowed old school Banderite Stefan Bandera Nazis to take over the government and put a puppet Jew up for the people to go, oh no, that can't be there. Well, if it isn't there, well, so I'm saying that so a pattern, a seed of, then it could destroy Europe, because if this thing goes, I'm hearing some disturbing news, and I'm hopeful that it won't happen, but there's a pattern, and it's about the 12th. The 12th of October is an important date because on the 12th of October, the monthly meeting of the commanders of NATO with their contacts in Ukraine and the United States convenes in Ramstein, Germany. It happens every month since this war began in February of 2022, or the NATO proxy war using Ukraine as a proxy to be the whipping boy for NATO fighting, killing with Russians. But the Russians from the first day realized that this was a NATO war against them. And they see it exactly like they saw in the invasions by Napoleon and Hitler. It's exactly the same thing. And they're, no matter what they like or not like about the leadership of Russia, they're one with them. And that's why they're winning. Um, and NATO, which has exhausted all of its weapons, has really nothing to fight with anymore, and will take many years to build it because their industrial complex is all about profit, not purpose. The Russian military complex is about purpose, and it's about keeping it simple and keeping it strong. They don't make F-35 fighters that can do this and that and wash your face while you're pushing a missile or something like that, and something breaks.
Well, John, what's scary, what you're saying, kind of, this is like, remember what I said about that IDF soldier that was at the shoal, and he said
Mhm.
that he was told that he was going to be deployed into
Mm,
Lebanon,
mm,
and this is going to most likely take place after Sukkot.
yeah. Is that the
Yom
12th?
Kippur, no, Yom Kippur ends on the 12th.
Oh my God.
So I'm telling you, there's the John, you can appreciate this because of
I
the
do.
astrology and the numerology that you know. But the thing is that Simchas Torah last year, October 7th,
Yeah,
that year the shofar couldn't be blown. It was a curse
right.
on the Jewish people. This
Right.
year, the shofar could be blown, so there's a blessing to the Jewish people. That means that the soul root of Esau, all right, it is not as strong in the 6 months of the year that it is strong in relative terms to Jacob. So that
Okay.
means that the Jewish people it has a moment spiritually to be more victorious on a battlefield. If you look at this from a Kabbalistic soul
Mm,
root point perspective, all right. But the thing is that they hit the Jews last year on Simchas Torah. So
mhm,
that's the ending of the Torah reading. It's
mhm,
right after Sukkot, and it's the beginning of the new reading of the Torah cycle.
mhm.
So ending Deuteronomy and going to Genesis or Bereshit. So, but Yom Kippur judgment that's Yom Kippur is like that's you're praying for your soul. That's Judgment Day, right? So between Rosh Hashanah and the 10 days to Yom Kippur, and then the Sukkot, and then you have the 8 days of Sukkot, and the Simchas Torah is right after that. These things are all together, John. I mean,
Mm,
there's some powerful energy that's happening here, and
mm.
that I call people like yourself the sensitives. Meaning that you are in tune to this. You can hear the harmonic, or you can feel the energy.
For the
And
Discord.
right. So something is boiling. Something's
Well,
boiling, and it's and you're bringing up dates that are like it
yeah.
coincides right to the high holy dates. I mean, right,
So,
exactly.
so it's important then incumbent upon me to explain what's going on in Ramstein potentially on the 12th. And, I just learned about this today, and I definitely got a feeling about it. And now you adding the fact that Yom Kippur is involved. Yeah, there's a certain harmonic convergence happening here, or disharmonic if the way one looks at it, the way it's being used. But because the thing that it was Military Summary Channel. Dima is a white Russian guy he's the best mapper of the Ukrainian mappers. He really waits until he really has proof positive that things have changed on the battlefield. And he's doing quite a remarkable job during this war. And there's a lot of really good mappers doing stuff, but he's the top. And he was talking about his sources, and they're usually pretty good. But he was basically saying what the European NATO countries are going to petition to do on the 12th is they are going to press to get that thing that Biden said they couldn't use. That is deep missiles. The missiles are already being moved to be in Ukraine by the time of the 12th. And what that means is because they're going to they want to give Zelensky, who's losing his mind anyway, he thinks he can win, and he can't win unless he has missiles that he can fire deep into the Russian territory, real Russia, non-disputed Russia, deep all the way to Moscow and beyond. Now, last month, the Russians changed their nuclear doctrine in response to this and did something that they don't want to do, but they're dealing with nut jobs in the West who just don't believe that they're doing anything but bluffing. The danger with that is maybe they are bluffing until they are not, and then you're all dead. So it's a dangerous game to say, oh, he's bluffing, but he's keeping escalating. Now they've had to do something they didn't want to do, but they had to get our attention in the West. And what they did is they made it clear that any nuclear nation who is aiding and abetting a non-nuclear nation in a war with us, and if you then fire in the name of Ukraine, but you're piloting it, you nuclear nation, deep into Russia, we will consider that an act of war, and all our options, including nuclear, are on the table. They've already moved their nukes. They're already getting ready. They're already moving their stuff around and getting ready for the potential of having to. And this means not just bombing that nation, non-nuclear nation like Ukraine, with conventional and other things. They're going to target the nuclear nations in NATO, the United States, Britain, and France. And what happened on, I guess it was in late September, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of Stammer, I guess, a strange name, strange man. He came with his delegation from London to see Biden in the White House with his red packet in his hand with all the targets that the Storm Shadows and some other longer range things we're going to use go deeper into Russia. But what happened is this message was given to the Pentagon from the generals and the head of Russia, Gerasimov and other people. And they got on the hotline and said, look, and I think they probably even got a list of targets. Like, we already got our targets, here they are. And our hypersonic missiles you can't shoot down, and all your targets are going across Europe. Now, I've been writing about the danger of pushing the Russians to have to make a demonstration to hit. And maybe they start conventionally, because all these hypersonic missiles can do conventional. In fact, if they use the glide bomb, the glide wings, the Avangard, that flies at Mach 27 speed, 27 times the speed of sound. Nothing can shoot it down. Its own kinesthetic energy, I believe, if it just hit just by being so fast hitting a target, would be like a small nuclear explosion, but not radioactive. I mean, if they were throwing that into the government center of Ukraine, all the government buildings, it'd be a crater there. The palace, the Rada, all, it'd be a big, deep crater of a dozen blocks just on its kinesthetic effect. I think it's something like the impact kinetically is 90 tons of TNT, something like that. But it would have a warhead on it too, and even a conventional one that's large. And so these fly in a few minutes. They'll get to their targets before anybody knows what hits them. And the Russians are so far advanced in hypersonic technology and missile defense and all that I've been talking about earlier, and jamming radios and stuff. They're way ahead of the West because we're seeing it. The Western stuff is getting jammed. It's not working. We're way behind. And the danger is when you discover that you're so mournfully behind in waging something with Russia, what's your temptation to do? Launch your nukes. Because that's all you got. You don't have many options. You can't win conventionally. And when the line starts unraveling and the Russians start moving towards the Dnieper River, and that's coming, it's already starting slowly, and it may be for the next month or so. It'll get to a point where people start panicking in the Western leadership again. And when they do that, they always seem to do the thing. They say, no, no, we'll never do that. That's World War III. So Biden got the message this time from the top generals in the Pentagon, who are literally, I've been saying, they are the only people that are a rational barrier against this insanity of Western thinking, trying to talk themselves into winning a nuclear war, completely forgetting mutually assured destruction, which I lived through in the Cuban Missile Crisis. So because Biden was around then too, even though he's suffering dementia, he has his moments, and he was spoken to from the Pentagon, said they mean it this time. They've already drawn up the targets. And then here you got Keir Starmer coming in the room with his targets to hit back Russia. And then they sat down, and Biden had to say, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to send the JASM, these other missiles, hundreds of them, to Ukraine. These would give, because they want them in Ukraine, these can give them, the Ukrainians, well, it's not the Ukrainians, it gives NATO, allowing the Ukrainian team on the ground with the missile to put in the codes from NATO. So the only thing the Ukrainians are doing is playing human tools. They're not plotting and targeting these. It's NATO. It's America. They're not doing, in fact, that a lot of what Israel is doing is following the American plotting and targeting, even in that theater. They're going to be there. And Putin said it out straight. He said, except for pushing the button to launch this thing, this is entirely the United States, France, and Britain fighting us. So we are announcing, if you do that, you're at war with us. And all options are off the table. And so this is something that never came close to happening in the Cuban Missile Crisis. So is Europe in a better place? No, Europe's about to be a graveyard. It's so Yom Kippur and its kind of death and rebirth kind of ritual, the end death of one year, the beginning of another. Well, this could be a death of an age and the beginning of another with what's going on. So now, our greatest prophet in the United States was Edgar Cayce, and back in 1944, he was looking at the nations of the future, and he said, "What of Russia?" He said, "Russia's the hope of the world." Not Bolshevistic Russia, because it's 1944 and Stalin was running it. No, it's the Bolsheviks will be gone. There'll be a new Russia, and it will cry freedom. And it is. I would say Russia has more freedoms now than we have. They have more free speech than we have. I know this from being involved in being a guest on Russian media. I never get censored. I criticize Putin like everybody else in Russia does. In fact, you get more healthy criticism and debate in Russian radio and news than you find here in America. It's all very much propaganda of the main state. And then you got X. X is more like Russian media or Telegraph Channel. It's a lot more free ocean of ideas going on there. And you'd think that if you just listen to CNN and the legacy news, that they're all just lockstep, and Vladimir Putin isn't a Christian Orthodox Christian. He's an atheist communist or something like that. It's so utterly ignorant. And that ignorance is going to get you all killed. Because if you think this is true, you'll make the decision that blows you up. So it's that close. And I personally, I don't know if we'll survive this month with the kind of forces of stupid that are. And I think the only thing that can happen is the very thing that the West thinks is weakness is literally keeping them alive, is the restraint of the Russians. It is legendary in this. But they know something those poor people in the West running things don't see. They know you're pathologically sick. You're talking about doomsday, winning the battle of doomsday. No, you won't win. The Russians are dealing with people who are mentally ill, that are or naive or just not up for the job in the West. So they've been you're all alive because of Russian restraint, ladies and gentlemen. You're all alive for 2 years. Thank the Russians for that. Because if they were like your leaders, you'd all be dead a long time ago. Maybe all the way back to when the second Cold War began in 2014, when the whole problem in Ukraine and between the Nazis and the Russian ethnic speakers started. It could have been then too. But the Russians are patient and resilient, and they are sane. Uh, we are not. Our leaders are not, and our people are misinformed. And that has always been Stormberger, one of the, I've spoken of him before, the guy who predicted the 3 world wars and predicted the first 2 so clearly, not ambiguously. You know, he said that with open eyes shall the people of the world walk into the catastrophe, which is the Third World War. And he said the Third War. And he said there will be people. I said this to 20 million people on Coast to Coast, which was nice that I got to do this. I read out the World War prophecies. I mean, maybe in our next show, I could do the same and just read them out, because I have them in these articles, and I just read the whole thing out. And then there's 2 articles that one focuses on the Russian version of what's going on, and then the other looks at the same and some more prophecies again about the Israeli-Arab situation that we're in. And they all these prophecies harken back to 1990, when I set them down when I was writing the Millennium Book of Prophecy in India. It was later published 4 years later, 1994, with Harper San Francisco in America. So this is all documented stuff. These passages are stuff I wrote right in the beginning of my career, and they're shockingly accurate to what's looming for us now. Even I was surprised. You know, I don't burden myself trying to remember everything I wrote. So I go back to it and I go, oh my God, I said that. Wow. You know, so I'm as much shocked as you are with me. So so I do think in general, we're in some kind of, well, we are in the Hopi purification prophecy. They say, you know, the Hopi. So there are many different traditions around the world that have this idea of an old world ready to die and be replaced by a better world. And this process, according to the Hopi, has happened 4 times, that humanity's gone through a destruction process, and then survivors start again another world, the first world, the second world, the third. And we're currently in the 4th world, which actually it was caused by a flood. So, you know, another link to Noah and all of that that's shared all over the world. This one will be a fire, and the purification will be through flames. And the Hopi, I wrote, it's a small book, it's a very popular book. It's the Essential Hopi Prophecies. If you go on Amazon and type in my name, or get on one of my, you know, type in my name and find my author's page, you can see the books there. But I strongly recommend you all go out and buy. It's in email as well as in print, that you can choose. And it's a short book, but it's the fundamental prophecies of the Hopi. It's not all the extra baggage that when the Hopi prophecies became famous, that a lot of people added stuff, which is just their minds. It's not, has nothing to do with Hopi prophecies. So it's just like, if you want to really find out what Close Encounters of the Third Kind stories are about, I would be less involved with reading the things that have come since mid 1960s. If you want to read a book where there was no biases involved, where everybody involved, including a psychiatrist involved with a couple named Barney and Betty Hill, who had the first really documented close encounter of a third kind from a psychoanalyst was not had any idea about aliens or anything that he just wanted to help these people who lost several hours of their lives. So he put them under hypnosis. He did hypnosis right. You know, it's a real art to do hypnotic suggestion to people. It's so easy for you to add a word. If you make oh, do you mean this? You never do that. Like if, oh, well, these people, they're the grays and stuff. Oh, do you mean they're aliens? Yes, you'll get a yes, because that's when you're under hypnosis, the person will start taking your biases in. This guy was amazing because he transcribed the whole thing. So the way he is a study, this doctor is a study in how to do hypnotic suggestion and find out and not make them be penetrated by your own biases. Very neutral. And it's a remarkable tale, and it's all before it all got muddied up with everything else in the UFO world. It's just become a mess now. So I was inspired by that book, Interrupted Journey by, I think, John Fuller, I believe, was the author. It's called An Interrupted Journey or Interrupted Journey. Very good book. And I think it was in the early to mid 60s that it came out. It's still in publication. It's a classic. Read that. And then the other thing, what I tried to do is I made sure that I would only do the same thing with the Hopi prophecies as I did with that he did with UFOs. Only the stuff that the Hopis actually said, as it was related to good, virtuous Pahanas, the White brothers, like Frank Waters, and there was another fellow, I can't think of his name at the moment, wrote Rolling Thunder, or knew a Hopi named Rolling Thunder, and did share these are the canon of what the Hopis, who hid this in oracular tradition for 1,000 years, and only when the final warning started happening did they say it's now time to tell the world. And I actually met one of the messengers of this, Thomas Banyaka. I gave him a copy of one of my books that had the Hopi prophecies in it just before he died. And he's one of the first messengers, so he's in the book a lot. The Hopis are not complicated in their prophecies. They're very simple and basic and down to earth. And basically, they're saying that they see a situation where there will be an ecological world crisis that would herald the purification, and that and there could be nuclear war, because their final warning. I mean, at first they had the warning of that the white people, Pahana, would come from the east, and they did. Cortez and Columbus, all those people, and that if they had crosses on their ships and their persons, they were the false Pahana. The true Pahana would come with a circle that has no beginning or end. So if they come with big crosses on their sails and stuff, they're coming to cause a holocaust of the Red Brother. Now the Hopi survived all that but what they said, they'd come with these big animals with long horns. That was one of the final warnings. And then they said that they would make wires that they suspend over the ground, telegraph wires. And then they said near the final warnings, the Hana would crisscross the skies with cobwebs, contrails. So, and these are just some of them. Then there was a situation where there'd be a great war amongst the Pahana that would have three great forces involved: the red, the swastika, and the sun. Russia, Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan. And this is when Thomas Banyaka was alive, and in fact, he was drafted when the war started. He said, "You have to go and fight for your nation." He said, "Well, my nation's the Hopi nation, not the American nation." and they arrested him. And the elders said, "This is a trial and test for you," because he did hard labor for 2.5 years, breaking rocks in the desert. But he survived it. It strengthened him. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and it made him a formidable man that could go out and make this message after the war was over. Because the last warning was that the white people would create a gourd of ashes. Now, a gourd is Hopi gourds. I mean, there are a lot of gourds that are round and they have a big opening and this and that, but a Hopi gourd is unique in that it's round with a very thin neck. So if you turn it over, it looks like a mushroom cloud, the gourd of ashes. I said it would be lit off near Hopi lands. Alamogordo is near Hopi lands. It would poison the earth that it exploded upon. Nothing would grow there. Radiation. And so these were the final warnings. And the last warnings, the real last warnings, is that the white man would build a teepee orbiting the earth. Now, the Hopi knew that it was not only around Earth, but they called North America Turtle Island. And it actually, if you look at the outline, it looks like from space, a turtle, a Hopi kind of drawing of a turtle. How they did that, who knows? But they're amazing people, and their prophecies have that rare prophecy of just pure simple. It's hard to get the interpretation all muddled. As many native fourth world people are very good at really just spelling it out. And basically, you know, nuclear war and global warming were very much a part of the fire, but also the awakening of consciousness, the fire, the inner fire of your awakened soul is also an option for us. But the fourth world will be destroyed. To what extent that means, I don't know, but they said that after that happens, the people that would survive and rebuild again would be much more spiritual, more harmonious with nature. And you know, I see some when I step back from all the complexities of what we've been talking for the last few hours, when I just look at the what basically is it, and when you talk about all the dates coming together, um, this is a purification that's going to happen that's going to destroy a lot of structures and things that we've known. But if it's following the where I think it's going, then this is not the end of us, but it is the end of a lot of things that we've known, because this large epoch of the fourth world, according to them becoming the fifth world, requires a death and rebirth of the human civilization. How that is done, literally or metaphorically, your guess is as good as mine. But certainly, it seems to me that the 2020s are definitely fulfilling the beginning of the fulfilling of the purification of fire prophecies of the Hopi. And we are in it now. So we'll see how it pans out. I mean, the general feeling I got from a lot of Kabbalist sources from my American source was that they just kind of felt, well, yeah, there'll be a nuclear war and it kind of get all wrecked, but we have to kind of start all over again with the concept of Israel being in Palestine. And I've always said, let us drop both names, Israel and Palestine, and call it the nation of Abraham, because it's only a one-state solution that's going to work. When this is all done, there's got to be a situation where the rights of both seats are equally shared, and where a kind of democracy and rules that allow the respect of both Arabs and Jews in Palestine in their shared land, they are to live in harmony as Abraham's seed, as cousin brothers and sisters. And that's the only future that I see for what has been often called Israel and Palestine. in the Middle East.
Well, thank you very much, John. And we've gotten to the point where it's been 2.5 hours, I think.
Well, that's usually the
Almost
sign off time. I can go look and see if there's any auroras outside.
So, but I want to remind the audience, please make sure that you click the link, go to John's website, sign up for his periodical, sign up for a reading, help support his work. I enjoy these talks, and you know, I always learn something, and you
Me
know,
too.
I think that you know, these dates are something that people should, you know, pay attention to, and that
Yes.
you know, things are, there's a quickening, you know, that's happening, you know.
Yes.
So, but
Oh,
thank you, John, for
thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening to our long but interesting shows.
right, right. So, before we go, you have to say goodbye to everybody, John. Just our tradition.
Goodbye, everybody. Bless you.
All right, let me stop the recording here.